Hey, it's Matthew David. So, at the dog park again, and it is really, really windy out there, so I decided to come back and just do a quick video update. So, here's what's been on my heart. This is what I want to minister to. And there's no better way for me than to lay this out for you than to go ahead and read a hymn and then break it down to you. And the benefit of you staying here is you'll gain freedom and you'll gain the sense of wonder for life again that may be tarnished because of everything that your peripheral suggests to you that is real, which is not. It's a dream of the five material senses, and you are not bound to that dream any more than you're bound to a nightmare in the middle of the night when you're sleeping. So Psalm 291, hymn 291. Now just pay attention to the words and then let's talk about it. Quiet, Lord, my froward heart. Make me gentle, pure, and mild. Upright, simple, free from art. Make me as a little child, from distrust and envy free, pleased with all that pleaseth thee. Put this down. All right, so let's just break down that first part. Okay, this is important because I had this revelation. I'm walking into a Quick Trip to get my coffee, and the Lord spoke to me and said quite plainly, as simple as day, you live in my paradise, you live in my world, you never left my care. And to assume that God isn't big enough to know all things, to contain all things within himself, and to be able to preserve all life within his care and his protection and his own shield of armor, the whole armor of God, all you have to do is put that armor back on, and you don't have to take thought or worry for any of these things that are happening, because you don't exist in that dream, that nightmare, any more than you do in a nightmare while you're asleep at night. So it says, quiet, Lord, my froward heart. You see, your heart becomes troubled. So bring down the volume of that trouble into a place of peace, surrender, rest. It's not your battle. You don't have to do anything. In fact, the more you push against what's going on, the more you reinforce it, because you're implying the idea that there is two powers. See, the crux, the error, the disillusionment, the separation, the division from God comes from the idea that there are two powers, good and evil. There is one power, one presence, one mind, and that mind is God. God is all. When you assume a position aside, separate, outside of that will of good, that presence of God, because you have used human sight to perceive an error, an illusion, a temptation, right? That's what it talks about in the Lord's Prayer. Lead us not into temptation. See, don't go into those delusions. You see it. Oh, I saw it. It must be real. It said on the media they're going to kill me. They're going to put the thing in the arm, and they're going to do this. They're going to, okay, whatever. To imply that there is evil is to make contract with that, because you're giving your attention to it, all right? You are turning towards it. It is your God. It's a false God. It's a false idol. You have turned away from that which is eternal, that which is good, that which is pleasing in the sight of the Lord, and you have turned toward the wickedness of mortal opinion. Here today, gone tomorrow, temporal, illusion, dream. Now it says here, make me gentle, pure, and mild, upright, simple, free from art. See, the human will is like an art form. Life is art, or life imitates art, they talk about. Well, we live by this principle that we're kind of like art in expression of our human behavior, our will. We do that which we say we don't want to do. For instance, we say we want to go on a diet, and then we go out and we binge on pizza, and we skip the gym. We do things like this. That's human irrationality. That's what it talks about here. That's what the art means. It's not principle. It's void of principle. It's abstract art. It's abstract, but it's still being guided and led by principle. That's what I'm trying to get to you. Now, an example of that is listening to Dannion Brinkley speak about his death experiences. You know, he's been hit by lightning twice. He had open heart surgery. He had another thing. He died like 3 or 4 times. And he talks about how when you transition over, you don't die. There is no death. He said if you only knew, you would laugh because there is no death. So everybody's running around frantically scurrying and losing the joy of this moment. They're off in their mind, losing the joy of this eternal day that God has created, His day of perfect rest that you were designed and engineered to live in as His Son, His reflection, His consciousness. There is no other consciousness. But human opinion comes along and it sweeps the earth. It's the terror that swept the earth, and it looks for a host, and it finds someone that puts up another god and creates a false idol, breaks the first 2 commandments. And then we turn towards that. It becomes our contract, the law of sin and death. And we go into the spell of the 5 senses, off in a distant land like the prodigal son, dreaming in sin. And so when we so-called die in that dream of sin, there is no death, because death is not existing anywhere in the principle of life. Life is a permanent principle of existence. It is forever held intact in its perfect place, and there's no point of existence where death comes to interfere with that principle. You see, that's first principle thinking right there. But yet you dream about death, and you dream about the terror in the night and these people that are coming after you and all of these things that are going to happen to you. And you thereby reinforce those things by pushing against them and therefore solidifying them in a realm of matter that you have to see, smell, hear, taste, and touch. And yet God never created any of it. So make me as a little child, from distrust and envy free. This is the big part right here. Make me as a little child from distrust. Now this is the part that hit me when I went into the coffee, or the Quick Trip to get the coffee. Is that there is nothing for you to fear whatsoever. Nothing at all. And the sooner you get that, the sooner you live from that place. Because what's going to happen to you? Oh, you're going to die. There is no death. It's a dream. You're dreaming about this idea of death, just like you would if you were in the night sleeping and you had a dream that you're going to fall off a building, which I've done so many times in my dreams in the night. And, you know, what happens is I go up to the top and I fall off the building and I'm like, what? In the dream, and then I wake up and I'm like, oh, it was just a dream. It's exactly what happens in this longer fractaling cycle, right? Everything is the dielectric. It's all oscillating like this in different time parameters, right? Different ohms, different pressure mediations, etc. Well, you have these shorter time frames and these longer time frames. And you know, you dream at night for maybe an hour or 2, and then you pop out of the dream. You're dreaming in the flesh for maybe a few decades, maybe 9 decades or so, and then you pop out, right? Well, the whole idea of wisdom is that you become transcendent to all the dreams. By going to first principle thinking first, what is the principle? Well, God is all there is. That's first principle thinking. And so what we do is we build a structure on top of first principle thinking by starting from the root. So, make me as a little child free from distrust and envy. Amazing. This whole distrust thing, I wrote the book called Trust, the Most Powerful Force in the Universe, because it is. So when I'm getting my coffee, I'm realizing that this is the perfect day that the Lord hath created. I am to celebrate that right now because that is a first principle life fact. And anything that wants to come against me, remember it says there is no law against the fruits of the Spirit. So when I move into trust and I have faith and I have peace and I have love and joy and I claim back that which the Lord is and I reflect back what the Lord is and I stop reflecting what the world is doing but I reflect what the Lord is doing, there's no law against it. Then it says, pleased with all that pleaseth thee. Pleased with all of it. that pleaseth thee. What pleases God? His own reflection. When you align with goodness. Next verse, what thou shalt today provide, let me as a child receive. What tomorrow may betide, calmly to thy wisdom leave. 'Tis enough that thou wilt care, why should the burden I bear? See? So it's telling you right there to live in the perfect day that the Lord has created. Do not take the burdens of any of this evil that human minds are speculating about, because it doesn't coincide with verse principle mechanics. If God is all there is no room for anything outside of God. There is no evil, there is no lack, just like there is no death. And yet you are tempted. Remember, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. You're tempted into belief. And so we get into this belief of self. What is the belief of self? Well, according to human reasoning, it's idolatry. It's to believe that your flesh can do anything of itself. And so you build up all of your vanities in this world by who you know, what you know, how much money you have, how much strength you have. And you put all of this importance onto yourself, onto a dead vessel, onto a temporal illusion. And therefore, that's nothing but vanity in the sight of God. So that does not please God. So that is the part of you, the ego, that takes on all of the cares of this world, and it tries to push against anything it doesn't like, and thereby reinforces everything it doesn't like, and it finds itself trapped in a spell, the Delilah spell. But it says here, what tomorrow may betide, calmly to thy wisdom leave. Leave the cares for the next moment of your life. 5 minutes from now, tomorrow. It says leave it to God's wisdom. Not you, but God. God got you. God's got you. God's got you, but you have to trust. You have to make contract. If you do, then God's got you. God's got you no matter what. But if you make trust with God, then God will pop the bubble of that dream. God will put you in the perfect day that you have contemplated, because you become what you contemplate. When you contemplate evil all day by looking out there to see what's going to happen, you become what you contemplate. You become the evil in the world. 'Tis enough that thou, I can't even read these words. 'Tis enough that thou wilt care, why should I the burden bear? See? God's mind is all in all, so why should you have a thought, opinion of anything that could possibly be out of place, could go wrong, could come against you, could harm you, to dissuade you from your purpose in life, whatever. None of those things exist outside of God, because there is nothing that exists outside of God. Just reflect. Just reflect. Here, it says, as a little child relies on a care beyond its own, being neither strong nor wise, will not take a step alone. Let me thus with thee abide, as my Father, friend, and guide. You have a Father that is beyond any idea that you can conceptualize. Omnipotence implies all power. All power. There is no other power. All power. You're afraid of the elites? Who? What elites? All power is in the present moment. It is the mind of God expressing itself as divine love, looking for its own reflection to radiate that love back to itself, to create that continuity of good with its child, with its manifest, you. And as you contemplate that principle, that first principle of thought, that God is all, I live in this perfect day that God hath created, there is no evil, there is no temptation, there is no sin, there's only God the good, and I am contained therein. I am in the mind of God, the mind of good, nothing can come against me. And you celebrate that in your heart, like a little child would. It's not a form of ignorance, it's a form of spiritual maturity. You've already moved past ignorance. You went from innocence to sinful because of the contemplating of evil, and you ascend past that to the perfection itself. By knowing the gnosis of the knowledge that God is all, allows you to go into first principle thinking and to take first principle thought and to still yourself and meditate on that idea. And that meditation upon an idea of truth brings about the destruction of all sin and error. Because God destroys it, not you. And God will prosper by grace and not the works of your hands. And therefore, you don't need to strive in this world for all the attention, all the glory, all of the things that this world is coveted by all of the ignorant, massive opinions that circulate through the data sphere that are here today and gone tomorrow. We don't even think in those realms. We think of, what does God know to be true about God? Because the only thing happening here is good. The original word for God was good. And therefore, this eternal goodness that is radiating love, peace, joy, goodness, temperance, meekness, humility, forbearance of all things, patience, that's what it means, long-suffering, right? These principles, there is no law against them. So there is no law implies power. It implies principle of action, enforceable action. So when you see all this error out here, you're looking through human opinion. You're looking through the beliefs of the mind of the mortality that tells you that you were born in flesh and you will die at a certain age, and you have to go through all of this care and concern and worry about all the diseases and all the plagues and all the poverty and all the things, and you calculate and you scheme. And like I said many months ago, you're living in the derivative of life and not in the gold or the authority of it. You know how the derivatives market just squanders the fact, because what it does is it spins off a bunch of nonsense like fractionalized lending, right? You give me $1, I can loan out 100. You got nothing if you took the loan, because there is nothing there. It's the derivative, which means it's nothing. So all the opinions of human mortality are the derivatives of a principle. They are the offshoot, ignorant lies. They are not the fact. They are outside of the fact, and they always exist in past or future. They never exist in the red hot here and now, because all that is here and now is the principle of goodness. And so as you collapse time, centrifugal, right? Centripetal, whatever, centripetal, collapse time, because loss of power is time. Creating time-space illusion is loss of power. Collapse time to the very present moment. Put principle in your thought awareness. God is all, there is no other. Good is the only thing happening here. Be like a child, which means completely trusting in that first principle. You walk with your Father. He's a guide, He's a friend, and your divine, omnipotent Father. What would your divine, omnipotent Father ever let happen to you if you had complete faith and trust in that relationship? Nothing. Not a thing would happen to you, period. But you have to be the reflection of the Father. That's what the symbology of the personification of the principle is. We have a father and we have a son or a daughter, etc., right? That's the personification of a divine principle. The principle states that as you are the principle, you can only contain what the principle is, and you can only do what the principle is doing. So the activity of doing, the verb of motion in your reasoning mind, your thought, you cannot imply a counterfeit derivative and apply any law to that, because there is no authority to sustain it. It's always outside of now, which means it has no jurisdiction over life, because life is now. So if you have no jurisdiction over life, then you are in nothing. All of the dreams of sensation, of terror, are all nothing. They're nothing. Absolute nothing. So how do you demonstrate it? Remember, rest in peace, a divine contract, RIP, be dead to the world and alive in spirit. They put it in plain sight. They put everything in plain sight. See it for what it is. When you rest in peace, it means you don't live in a meat sack anymore, which means your mind moves from identifying with physicality to spirit. That's the principle that they're hiding in plain sight, praying that you'll never see it, because that's the bondage that you walked into, that they have over you for all of eternity. Who are they? They are the rulers, the archon, aeons, etc., right? Those are what you call the fallen, the fallen. Call them fallen angels, fallen temptation, fallen thoughts. You see, they are the derivative. They're derivatives, and they spin off derivatives, and they infect other minds to spin off derivatives, and it infiltrates every aspect of human ignorance to the point where the whole entire spider web of dataism is built on derivative nonsense. And so you occupy identification not with flesh but spirit as the reflection of the principle of goodness that is immutable, impenetrable, forever sustaining itself in its own creation, and it left nothing out of its own creation, and therefore there is no dream. You're looking at a dream, and that's what you see it as. You're like, this is a dream, because it defies first principle logic in a derivative space of nothingness, and nothing can come against the principle of life. There is no law that can come against goodness, therefore there's no authority to back it, and there's no verb of motion to create anything that could come into my now and interrupt anything that my Father has given me. And my Father walks with me, my Father protects me, my Father is me. I am celebrating my Father's existence because I'm in my Father, and it's because He lives that I have life, not because this ever lived, because this never lived. This idea of flesh was dead from the beginning. It was a liar from the beginning. And you cast off those perishable rags, just like Jesus did in the Gnostic Gospels, and you assume the garment, the finest robe. When the prodigal son came home and the father put on the finest robe, and the Father was pleased. That's what it means. I exist in spirit because my God, my Father, is spirit, all in all, forever present, the only mind, the only presence, the only power. I exist because God exists, and nothing can come against existence because there's nothing else there. And the principle is goodness. And that's it.